I'm here with the No Cap crew. How are you guys doing tonight?
So good, so good.
Better than I deserve.
I'm having this wonderful piece of Red Lodge pizza, and shout out to Pizza Co. It's doing the trick.
Well, we're back with a live stream after being off last week because I was having surgery. I have successfully had surgery, and I'm in recovery right now. And crazy as I am, I'm doing this show with these crazy people. So tonight, we don't have a very special guest. We have a very special intern guest on the show tonight. We have Joey, who is our summer intern. Who, you know, if you've interacted with us on X, a lot of that is due to Joey. So we really appreciate all the hard work during the summer. We're going to go around the horn and introduce ourselves. We'll get to Joey just a second. We're going to start off with Roger tonight. Roger, take the lead.
Okay, I'm digging the curve in Joey's hat, man. He's got a severe parabola on the bill of that cap. I haven't seen one that severe in a while. And regarding last week's show, you know, Jeff had the week off, but Walter and I had a rollicking good time in an X space with one guest. One we've had before, Edward. What is it? Edward Francis? What is his last name, Walter?
Yeah, I think it's Edward Francis.
Oh, okay. Anyway, he's been with us before. Lots of ideas. Spends a lot of time thinking about this stuff. I'm Roger Scott. I'm a CPA in North Carolina. I'm part of the No Cap crew, and I'm here to agitate for better and more voluminous representation, but better for sure, and more participants is even better still.
Walter?
Awesome. Yeah, I'm Walter. I am the president of the No Cap Fund. For those that don't know me, I ran for president of the Republican primary against Trump with a team of horses. I live in Laramie, Wyoming, also called Red Lodge, Montana home. That's where I am right now. And yeah, I mean, representation is the key to our future. It is the thing that we all need to care about. And yeah, I hope you'll join me in making this the thing. And Joey is one of those guys that helped us make this the thing. I'm an attorney. Joey is an aspiring attorney. So we'll kick it over to you, Joey. Introduce yourself.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, guys. My name's Joey. I'm a political science student at Andrews University in Southwest Michigan, and yeah, I'm kind of a late. I took a little meandering path from high school. I graduated in 2015 and took some time in the real world, the mission field, work and stuff to try to figure out what I wanted to do. But at the end of the day, it all came back to politics. That's the only thing. So the two subjects that you're not supposed to talk about in polite company, politics and religion, it's the only things I find interesting. So I'm in school for political science, pre-law, and about, well, was it this year? I think it was earlier this year. Well, so Jeff and I had started interacting in this group, this Reagan chat, and there's this idea that he kept mentioning, and I kept seeing it under his posts about uncapping the House. I was like, oh, it's, you know, like there's all these ideas people talk about. I'm like, but then I was like, okay, I got enough interested in it that I had him on the show that my friend and I co-host. And then after that, I was like, oh, wait a minute, this actually sounds like a great idea. And then the more I looked into it, I was like, this is the idea, right? Like this is like all of the problems that we talk about, they all come down to representation. And then, you know, I ended up interning with the guys in the summer. And now I'm that annoying guy who, whether it's Thanksgiving dinner or church outings or, you know, class, I'm talking about representation. I literally got one of my professors. I was in our class. It was so, I wore her down so much throughout the semester. And she was always saying by the end of it, like, she agrees with me. And I wore her down so much. She finally, one class started it with, okay, you don't need to mention y435.org. I signed the petition. So that's me.
Yeah, well, we appreciate all your hard work over the summer, Joey. For those who don't know me, I'm Jeff Mayhew. I'm a father of 5, small business owner. My mom's a banker. My dad's a mechanic. And I came to realize that we had a representation problem. I kind of set my life to the side, started working on it, and it led me here. So tonight we're going to talk about immigration. Immigration plays a big part in representation for a number of different reasons, mainly because the representation ratio is based off of, according to the Constitution, the number of people in the United States, and we count all people. Now, this has proposed a problem in our country over time. It's my content, based on why we capped the House, had a lot to do with our inability to write immigration laws, naturalization process. People like Boss Tweed in New York would use immigrants for votes. They would basically blackmail them. They would offer them, citizenship papers in order to vote for his particular candidate at the time. And this caused, problems. We also had population shifts because of the incoming amounts of immigrants into the country, into the urban areas versus the rural areas. So we had this discrepancy in population. And, it caused all these sorts of problems that ultimately led to the capping of the House. Now, we fast forward today, we have a lot of those same problems today. The Trump administration has been a hardcore immigration administration, both in the first and now the second administration. You can agree or disagree with them on policy or how they're interacting with it, and we're definitely going to talk about that tonight. But what we should understand is that Congress has a responsibility to solve problems, and immigration has been a problem for a really long period of time. We haven't written serious immigration reform, I would argue, probably since the Reagan administration in 1986. However, I think the first Bush administration did write some immigration policy. We were really close with immigration policy with the Gang of Eight during the end of Bush's W's administration, but ultimately it failed. The Obama administration failed to get immigration policy passed. They used executive orders. And now what we see with Trump doing is executive order and using a lot of executive power to wield immigration. So Walter had sent a great FedSoc panel on originalism and immigration to our little chat group. And so we thought it would be a great opportunity to start the conversation about this. I know Walter's got a mouthful of pizza right now. Shout out to Red Lodge Pizza. If you're listening,
I got it.
We could use a sponsor. But I'm going to let him start out the conversation. It was your kind of topic. It was your panel that you sent in. I think everybody has watched it. Plus, we all have our own experiences with immigration that we'll talk about as well. But why don't you get us started, Walter?
Yeah, so the debate is Akhil Reed Amar, and he is a Yale law professor. And he's written a bunch of books and a bunch of articles about originalism, which is a theory of judicial interpretation. And he was there on the panel with a Texas Supreme Court judge and a couple AGs, one in the White House and one at the state AG, and then a law professor from Georgetown. And Mr. Amar is, I would say, a little bit more liberal, as was the professor from Georgetown. The remainder were very conservative, and there was a lot of debate about sovereignty vis-a-vis the border, the Texas border in particular, right? The ability for the state of Texas to assert its self in the abdication of the federal government in particular. And, Mr. Amar, he mentioned birthright citizenship, which is important because it relates to the 14th Amendment. The sovereignty discussion and the discussion of immigration and whether or not the states or the feds have the power. Roger and I talked a bunch about that last time, and we can get back into it. But I think what's interesting is Mr. Amar, Akhil's thoughts on how the 14th Amendment may apply and whether or not the president has the authority to change who is counted in the census for representation under the 14th Amendment. But yeah, it is. I definitely commend people to go give it a listen. Mr. Amar is, I think he's extremely knowledgeable, and I think one of his key points is Mr. Lincoln was right. Mr. Lincoln was right. Mr. Lincoln was right. And it is it's important that we not have states secede. Despite how bad things are, right? That is kind of the threshold upon which things will get very, very much worse. And so I think for Texas to play with that was his point. There is very it's very important for them to defer to federal power. And I think with Mr. Trump in office, they have decided to legally, and so that's good news, I think, for us. But yeah, I mean, immigration is such a hot topic, and my hope, my prayer is that Trump is preparing to uncap the House, right? We have to get the immigration question settled before we can uncap the House. I think, frankly, for it to make sense for the right. And I don't like the way he's doing it, right? I think is the key element, and in particular, I will say this, it's the masks. If our law enforcement officers are wearing masks, I'm very uncomfortable with that. And because it feels militaristic. Because the military covers their face, generally a police officer does not. It is somewhat militaristic, and so maybe that is okay. But I sweeping people off in these extrajudicial killings, and you pair that with what's going on with Venezuela, right? And it's it's obviously a very touchy issue, and I think obviously it could be done better, right? Let me put it that way. It's not. It has to be done. It is difficult. And yet, it's being done. And I don't know. I'm going to turn it over. I've been babbling.
All right. So yes, I will save you. So what I'll say is the Venezuela thing I think is really important to this conversation for different reasons than you mentioned, and I'll get into that in a minute. But I want to get Roger in first. Roger, because I missed the space last night or last week. So what was your take on Akil's version of federal authority and the bill of the 14th Amendment and how it applied to state sovereignty?
Well, I've seen Akil on other panels or on television or whatever. I recognize the look. He's a wicked smart guy.
Wicked smart.
One of the biggest things I took away from it, not being a conservative and not having a thorough understanding of originalism in the first place, listening to him describe it, right? The three pillars, the way he approaches text, history, and the structure of the whole, or taking a holistic approach. It made more sense to me how originalists approach the Constitution now. I still disagree with it. I don't think we should be living under the dead hand, right? That's my position on the whole issue of originalism.
So you agree with Thomas Jefferson that it shouldn't govern the living?
Yes. The philosophy and the zeitgeist is a term we use a lot. What was going on 250 years ago. I won't say it's irrelevant to today because that would be untrue. It is relevant to today, but it's not all encompassing. It's, what was going on 250 years ago bears little resemblance to what's going on today. We have principles, stakes in the ground we can work with, but I don't see originalism as the way to go. Having said that, with the discussion of sovereignty got pretty heated.
What would you recommend in the alternative?
Well, you're asking him to give a philosophical take on how to interpret the Constitution when he just said he didn't 100% understand originalism. I don't know if that's a fair question.
There's so much. I don't think the interpretation of the Constitution should stop with a view of only what happened 250 years ago. That stuff should be part of the conversation, but not the entire conversation. I want a more holistic approach, just like Akil.
I think that originalism does that. I would say originalism, because you're always applying it to modern facts, it is taking modern facts in light of, what was intended when the Constitution was amended or originally passed. So, like, if you're doing originalism on the 14th Amendment, you're not looking at the founders, you're looking at the, Reconstruction.
Yeah, but Akil in that conversation basically said that, the 14th Amendment kind of wipes away state sovereignty. It creates a federal supremacy that is, untouchable. And, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think what John Bingham was trying to do with the 14th Amendment was apply the Bill of Rights to give the federal government the power to enforce the Bill of Rights in all the states. But that doesn't negate the 10th Amendment. That doesn't mean that all rights are reserved to the federal government and only specified rights are reserved to the states. It still means that the federal government still has limited authority. It just expanded that little bit limited authority to the Bill of Rights.
Okay. But so on the issue of sovereignty again, though, where I was going, Akil made an excellent point. He talked about the things that a sovereign country can do that states can't. For example, treaty was a big, was the example that sold me, right? States can't make treaties with other governments, only with other states. So that seals the deal. I don't believe states are sovereign. Now, the question of whether Texas can exercise authority at the border in the case where the federal government has abdicated, to use Walter's term, yeah, I view that as a different question. That's not a question of sovereignty. That's a question of defending the border of your state the same way you would if there was zombies in New Mexico trying to get in, right? You would defend the border of your state on the north.
When you're defending the border of your state, you're defending the sovereignty. It's self-government. Do you have the right to protect yourselves? If the federal government says you cannot protect yourself, lay down your arms and let the people in, do you have to listen to them because of the 14th Amendment, or are you allowed to defend yourself?
Well, the Supremacy Clause says you have to listen to them, right? Federal law is always trumps state law because of the Supremacy Clause.
Well, there's a specific provision on this.
The idea these
people
are coming over
to for my notes.
Attack the government. They're not coming over the Rio Grande to attack the government of Texas. They're trying to get the hell out of Texas in all likelihood, right? So it's not exactly an invasion that's going to overthrow the Texas way of life.
Well, does the state government, does the federal government have supremacy over the state governments in everything, or only in the things where the Constitution grants the federal government, supreme authority? That would be my question.
To the extent
I want the federal
government state makes a law.
I was just going to say I want it to have authority in foreign policy. I don't want states, making their own foreign policy, but I think in things where, the 10th Amendment, right? If it's not delegated by the Constitution to the federal government, it's left to the states or reserved to the states. So I would think that that's a degree of sovereignty. It's lesser, but I still think it's some degree of sovereignty, right?
Yeah, and I think to the point here is so James Wilson was a delegate in Pennsylvania during the Constitutional Convention, and he did not want a Bill of Rights, and he didn't want a Bill of Rights for very specific reasons. He believed that the Constitution had enumerated federal powers limiting a federal sphere, and he worried that listing a set of rights might imply that the federal government had powers that weren't granted. And I think that his fear kind of comes true with the 14th Amendment and the way that people might interpret it. They're interpreting the federal government to have all of these extra powers that it might not have, and giving it all these extra responsibilities. And I think, ultimately, I think there's an argument to be made on both sides. There's definitely people who are working in the room that wrote the 14th Amendment who wanted that to happen. And I think that Akil, I haven't read his books, but I will pick them up and I will read them. I bet he probably lays that out in his books in, a more detailed case. So, and I'm not trying not to judge. However, I think, back to where we started is do we have to be governed by the dead, or does our Constitution give us a basic set of frameworks to work from that we're allowed to kind of iron things out as we go along, which I think is kind of the point. We need to be able to iron things out as we go along, and immigration is one of those things that we just simply haven't ironed out. And having a fight of whether it's the state's responsibility or the federal government's responsibility to do immigration, I think what we really need to do is we just really need to get Congress to do their job and write immigration policy, right? We need rules.
For starters, to answer Joey's question, the Supremacy Clause simply means that to the extent the state makes a law that is in conflict with federal law controls, right? States have their powers that are, the Constitution, the enumeration of powers to the government otherwise left to the states. Supremacy in this case just means to the extent the state makes something that's in conflict with federal law will control. All right? Does that seem fair, Walter? You're the lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the example was made by the Attorney General from Texas, or assistant AG. I think he's assistant to Greg Abbott, or a lawyer to Greg Abbott. He made the point that the states and the feds obviously both have a criminal code, right, that is coextensive, and they often don't like conflict with one another, right? And so, it would be easy to have, I think, under his reasoning, for Texas to have its own immigration policy if the federal government isn't, dealing with immigration. But I think the question previously presented was like, can they build a wall? And to me, it would seem if the federal government is not building a wall, I think Texas should be able to build a wall to create checkpoints for itself. And maybe that wall has to be behind the federal wall, right? So like the feds would be able to build a wall in front of the state, but it would seem like the state would have that ability. And because it is clear, so this is Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3, no state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty of tonnage, keep troops or ships of war in time of peace, enter into any agreement or compact with another state, or with a foreign power, or engage in war, unless actually invaded, or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. So they do also, I mean, the states, and I think the 14th Amendment did not abridge a section like that. States do have the ability to, if there's a natural disaster, right, and the federal government is no more, obviously the state would resume some of its authority. But if the federal government is around, obviously, I think they are supreme, right? That there is I do agree that in the Reconstruction, obviously the federal government was given power to decide a moral question, which previously had been reserved to the states. And people are trying to return those questions to the states. And I think immigration is a moral question. However, we have a national immigration policy, and so that policy does, I think, in some ways preempt what, say, Texas and, Montana, Washington, North Dakota, Michigan, all the northern states also theoretically could set some sort of immigration policy, but there it's broken up, right? Whereas down on the Texas border, it's also broken up, right? I mean, Texas is kind of at issue here, but in both situations, right? It's like if Texas is acting without concert of its neighbor, it's kind of gonna be like impractical. Because ultimately they could just go in to the state just to the west, was that New Mexico, and then just duck into Texas, right? So frankly, they can't finish the wall, right? So although they could, it would be done probably because if you don't have the federal government on board, right? I think this is. Yeah, go ahead.
I believe it was the same gentleman you were just speaking of, the assistant AG, that was talking about how. Immigration policy was kind of decided by the states in a lot of ways for a long period of time. Yeah. And federal immigration policy came about around the progressive era, about the time that the House was capped, right? Which kind of, goes back to my point. Immigration is a big reason why this has. And I think ultimately, this is just a matter of what happens with power. Right? Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. But power that's unused is going to be used by somebody. And when somebody isn't using their power, if they're not fulfilling, because power is responsibility. And when somebody isn't fulfilling that responsibility, another power is going to step up and try to fulfill that responsibility. And ultimately, as I mentioned before, we haven't had serious immigration reform since 1986. It is 2025. It's going to be 2026 next year. And the federal government, the Congress, isn't doing their job. So what we see states trying to fill that void. And I don't think we should have a battle of federal versus state. I think we should have let's make Congress do their job.
Hey, we had a big deal immigration bill before the election, and Trump spiked it. Lankford had written a bill. Republicans wrote it and Democrats would accept it. That sounds like a pretty damn good deal to me. Point. Trump spiked it. The reason we don't have immigration reform in Congress is because of Trump.
Well, I mean, I have.
But they did
Go
wait
ahead, Jerry.
the end of Biden's. In other words, I agree the bill was a good bill, but like the bill should have happened, in year 1 or 2 of Biden's term rather
Yeah,
than. But I agree,
I have
Trump
a-
shouldn't have spiked it for political
I
reasons.
have a theory about that. I think the same impulse that is agitating so much for immigration reform right now is the same impulse, or maybe a mirror image of the impulse that is agitating for the extension of the healthcare subsidies right now. Right? If you look at the records, right, we were at for last 15 years up until 2021, we were running about 1 million a year net immigration, and then it dropped off the cliff for 2 years because of COVID. Then it came back, and then in 2023 it came back hard, nearly a record. And people had gotten used to the lower immigration psychologically, and when it comes roaring back, they're more agitated. The same thing with the healthcare subsidies. People had gotten used to those. I'm benefiting from them for the past couple of years. I'm on the marketplace, right? I got used to it just like everybody, and now it's going away. It happened because of COVID. Now it's going away, and people are agitating. I think that's the same impulse driving both of those. Although the immigration thing has more accumulated pressure from the past, I would say.
Well, so let's get into that, or let's talk a little bit about immigration. So, because I think the point that you're making is it's political. It's all political. They're not solving the problems. They're not doing the things that they needed to do because they're trying to win elections. So I've read 3 books on immigration in the past couple of months. One of them is this book right here, A Nation of Immigrants by John F. Kennedy. And so he basically walks through the early American immigration process. And he talks about, at the beginning, it was English settlers, Irish, German immigrants. Coming around the 19th century, we had Italians, Poles, Jews, Eastern Europeans, and we excluded Asians in a lot of cases. There was the Chinese Exclusion Act. I can't remember what year that was, but a lot of the immigration policy that was written was based out of race and fear in the early days, and we can't ignore that. And then, as we started to become a more open immigration policy, we were still chose who we let in based on kind of who looked like us. And not only that, but there was special interest at play here, depending on where the congressman wanted to vote for or what the Congress wanted to do, of where they gave the asylum numbers to. So Kennedy makes the point in his book, and I don't have the exact numbers, but let's say that year America accepted 60,000 asylum seekers, right? That was the total number. But they would apply those to certain countries, and those countries wouldn't fulfill those quotas, but then they wouldn't allow people from other places in that wanted to come here, right? Because they were trying to exclude certain types of people from being here. So the immigration policy has never really been based on anything other than, our prejudice in a lot of ways. Now, let's fast forward to our immigration issue today. So I read this book here. This is Everyone Who Is Here Is Gone. And I highly recommend this book if you want to study immigration. It definitely has a left-leaning tilt to it. You can tell when you're reading it, but it does have a lot of very factual information that is relevant that you need to understand. So beginning in the late 50s, 60s, 70s, America became this meddling country in other parts of the world, specifically El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. This helped create or perpetuate civil wars, state violence. There was economic collapse, and a whole bunch of people left these places. And where do you think they went? They went to us. They came to us. Okay. And the reality is we just were not prepared for it. We weren't prepared for the asylum seekers. We didn't have the judicial system set up. We didn't have the lawyers. We just didn't have a process ready for them. And so what happened is lawyers started helping immigrants through non-legal means. Okay, so they purposely subverted American law to help these immigrants into the country. Now, what happens is you get, with no laws and with good people acting outside of the law, you get kind of the worst of the situation. You get good people that are taken advantage of by the government and their own people that are either that are deported or like funneled into gangs. And then the worst part is you get a whole bunch of people that shouldn't be here. The violent people that they're escaping from, they come in the door with them. So this creates, the MS-13 gang is kind of built out of this failed process. And then when we finally write immigration reform, when we get things, there is this kind of deportation effort where you get a lot of these people out, and those gangs then go back to their homeland and create more havoc there. There's some other factors at play here too. It's not just the United States government meddling in other countries. There's their own country. They have their own responsibility of running their governments that they failed at. They have natural disasters that wipe out crops. They wipe out possibilities for food. People leave for different things like that. And then
Corruption.
I mentioned corruption. And I mentioned it before, we were unprepared. We wrote immigration law, and this cycle kind of perpetuates. We had a period of time where things were kind of balanced on immigration. Republicans and Democrats were kind of working together. And then we had the Gang of Eight bill that during the Bush administration, at the end of the Bush administration. This is where things got really political. There was the Freedom Caucus, or not necessarily the Freedom Caucus, might be the Tea Party, the Freedom Caucus. There was this period, this rise of like the nationalistic right wing that really started to take hold. I think Eric Cantor lost his primary, and that was the signal to the Republicans that you have to be a hardcore immigration hawk or you can't win an election. And that's, I think, what tanked the bill, because I think it passed the Senate, but it failed to pass the House. It had a pathway to citizenship in there. It had a guest worker program, and it had much stronger border security. Now you go through and you go to the Obama administration, they did not go back through Congress to get anything done. They took executive action. There's, I wish I would have, I think I might have it. There was a great quote by Obama in here. Oh man, I didn't flag it special. I wish I would have prepared for it. But there's a great quote about why this happened from Obama himself. And, oh, here it is. Okay, so this is Obama talking. We live in a world with nation states. I have borders. You may believe that it's inherently unfair that a child born in El Salvador has a completely different set of opportunities available and completely different set of dangers than a child born in the U.S. And that's because it is unfair, and I can't fix that for you. And he's talking to his immigration czar, basically like, this is a really complex problem. We can't make the world fair. We can't just let everybody come into the country. We have to have rules. And, I think Obama was trying to do that, but I think, the executive action is where the problem was, circumventing Congress. Because what do we have Trump doing now? Executive action. He's doing everything he can to enforce the rules that he believes should be in play. And Congress is, again, sitting impotent on the sidelines, doing nothing. So, and back to that Venezuela thing that Walter mentioned. We're talking about going to war in Venezuela. What do you think's going to happen to all those people in Venezuela? They're going to eventually make their way up this direction, and they're going to want to come into the United States. And we still don't have immigration policy. We still don't have strong border security. We still don't have a pathway to citizenship for people that want to be here and follow the rules. And we don't have strong naturalization process. Now, I know I've got a long diatribe there with history. I want to get Joey in on this one because, he's our guest tonight and he's our intern, and feel like I've kind of dominated the conversation. So Joey, come in, be part of the conversation. What are your thoughts here?
Well, so I agree with you on a lot of those things. I would say, well, first of all, I think where we all definitely agree is that when we talk about immigration policy, because of the reality of how it's played out, we have to talk about the courts and we have to talk about the executive. But really, if we actually had immigration policy, we wouldn't be talking about the courts and the executive, except for like along the edges, right? We'd be talking about Congress. I just would say on the Venezuela thing, I think it might like we don't want to lump it No, I think Congress should be taking the lead, obviously, but I don't think we should lump the situation necessarily in with other interventions, only because Venezuela is a case where 80% of the population in the last election voted against the guy who's currently in power, right? So I think most Venezuelans want him gone, and they want to stay in their country. I think it might be a little bit different than some of the things in El Salvador and whatnot. Just like, or even
So
I've heard people compare
hold
it
on.
to Iraq, but even that is
So that was my point, and I didn't put it in that history that I gave, but like we have had a massive increase of immigrants from the Middle East because of the Iraq war. And it doesn't matter whether the people want the regime gone or not. The point is that when you remove a regime, you create instability. And when you have instability, anything can happen. And the most likely thing that happens during an unstable period of time is a strong man rises to power, or a military rises to power, or some sort of corrupt faction rises to power and creates a bigger problem. Now, you could argue that that's just what has to happen to fix the problem in the long term, but I still think that it will affect immigration policy going forward. But continue, Joey. Sorry.
I was just gonna say the largest opposition faction in Venezuela is like a liberal democratic figure. I forget her name. That's the woman.
Machado.
She's
Machado, I think.
Yeah, and she was like she's the most prominent. But anyway, again, that's kind of besides the point to our conversation. But no, I just think the whole time you guys were talking, the thing I kept thinking, and like even back to the originalism discussion, like all of these conversations are about kind of like other ways to make law, right? Whether it's Obama and Trump going back and forth with their different executive orders, or whether it's this idea of like, moving away from originalism, right? Is like, I think, at least from what I see, is like in the 20th century, it was mainly progressives. Now there's some people on the right with like Adrian Vermeule and Common Good who they kind of want to get rid away from it too. But basically it's like, we don't like the law, or as it was written back then. And so we want the courts to like reinterpret it, right? Or to, rule this or whatever unconstitutional, when really what we should be saying is, well, if the law from back then is bad, right, whether the immigration law, our representatives should repeal it and write a new law, right? And I don't know. That's just kind of what was floating through my head.
So I got to jump in. So originalism definitely points us to, it puts more pressure on Congress. It's the Supreme Court, I think, in some ways are saying, using originalism, I think they are putting more pressure on Congress, and they're limiting some of the executive branch in some ways, vis-a-vis the overturning of Chevron. Okay. The other thing I've got to say is on the immigration topic, we have to touch on aliens, Jeff.
Like actual aliens or aliens to our country?
Age of discovery.
Both.
Disclosure.
Yeah, exactly. Disclosure.
Whatever.
Okay. And then the other thing I got to say that's like, if I could just say one thing over and over again about this.
Lincoln is right. Lincoln is right.
The only way for America to reassert control of its foreign policy, of the CIA, of the military-industrial complex, which may or may not hold alien biologics and craft, is with an uncapped House of Representatives. That is the only possible way. And that's the only way to stop what we're doing in South America, which is continuing to pick dictators and strongmen to serve our corporate interests. We have been, a non-empire empire for long enough that there's a lot of people that really are upset with the way we've been meddling with people while acting as a facade of a democracy, of a republic. And so if you want the world to take America seriously again, we must start by becoming a republic again.
Hear, hear.
All right. Well, I won't. I don't know. You just mentioned age of disclosure. You didn't actually get into it. I think the important takeaway from the age of disclosure is the documentary basically argues that there's a massive cover up spanning decades. I argue that it's more likely a result of a broken bureaucratic system that's eroded trust between the bureaucrats, the politicians, and the people. There is a massive imbalance between the people who provide oversight, that's Congress, and the agencies that need oversight. That's all of your 3-letter, abbreviated words. And, I agree with Walter. I mean, the best way to solve this problem is to uncap the House. We just need more people, regardless of whether it does sound like there is some sort of tech out there that is superior to what we have. Whether it's aliens or a foreign entity, a foreign government, we should be concerned and we should be aware of what's going on, because that threatens the national security, that threatens all of us. And, I think that the only way for that to be resolved is to uncap the House, to give Congress the resources to actually provide the oversight. You need actual people. There's nothing else that's going to fix this problem than actually putting eyeballs and human beings in the agencies, conducting actual oversight. If you watch the documentary, it lays out some evidence with some high profile people that there is at least some sort of agency within the government that we don't know about that has
The
this
legacy
technology.
program.
The legacy program, right?
Yeah.
Again, whether it's aliens or whether it's the Chinese, the fact is the legacy program doesn't have congressional authority. It doesn't have appropriations given to them by Congress, which means that they are misappropriating funds. They are circumventing the people and to fund an agency that we know nothing about. And that is,
Unacceptable. Entirely.
it's not good. And the only way that we're going to be able to catch it is we need CPAs. That was Nikki Haley's thing when she was running for office. She was like, we need a CPA in the executive. And I disagree. We
Roger.
do not. We need a CPA in the executive. We need CPAs in Congress to look at the books, man, so we can find out where our money's going.
Yeah, wasn't Nikki Haley's family's business found guilty of something while she was there as they're in their finance department? Yeah, she's an accountant, all right. She's just not a very good one.
Well, that's the
I don't think that
weaponization of the IRS.
I don't think that that's the case either. They had a small family business for a while. I think they did end up making some money towards
Guys,
the end.
how about
but
this? What if we get to move the IRS into the uncapped House?
I mean, I don't know what you mean by that. What do you mean move it into the
bureaucrats.
House?
So basically, like, have the bureaucrats that are in charge of collecting the money actually be in the legislative branch, which is tasked with collecting the money and spending it.
But
Now you're definitely going to need a very large uncap if you're going to do that.
if that had been the case, we would have gotten the tax returns. Mnuchin wouldn't have been successful in hiding Trump's tax returns when we were trying to get them from
Yep.
the
Amen.
committee.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Joey?
Go ahead, Joe.
In my opinion, most of the executive agencies, what they do should be in the purview of Congress, not the executive branch.
I mean, is the IRS any different? This has never occurred to me, but like,
I mean, like other than like the Secret Service, right? Like basically all of the agencies should be. Well, I guess DOJ should be in the executive.
well,
Yeah,
there
but then
should
there
be
is
there should
no reason
be
for a
executive officers that are tasked with executing some things, because obviously,
Yeah.
if Congress has an investigation which needs to be like have the FBI go arrest somebody, right? So I think at the end of the day, Congress does rely on the executive branch for some, but the first real secret committees and the first investigatory authorities were under Congress, right? I mean, going back to limiting what the executive branch is doing or providing oversight, a lot of this stuff is secret, and we need to be comfortable with our representatives having secret knowledge, right? There are things that they should not be able to tell us, but we need most of our members, I think, or more of our members, read into, actually what's going on from a numbers perspective, right? Because if they're going to catch the fraud, they've got to be schooled up on numbers, CPAs, Roger, should we just start chanting for you?
CPA.
CPA.
All right.
CPAs.
All right. So let's move on. It's only because for those who don't know, I had hip replacement surgery, and I got to get up and move around in a second here. So we're gonna have to come to a close in a minute. But I wanted to. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to chat about real quick? I wanted to mention just something real quick. Is I'm reading 2 books right now. They're behind me. Lincoln's Mentors. I read about 50 pages of that today. It's really interesting. It chronicles the people that Lincoln kind of held in esteem. And I found it really interesting because one of those people was Andrew Jackson, which I wouldn't have I wouldn't have guessed before reading the book that Andrew Jackson was one of the people. It's Andrew Jackson, Henry Clay, Zachary Taylor, and then 2 people that I don't know yet. I'll get to them as I get through reading through it. And then I'm also reading this other book. It's called Emergence. It's written by my friend Craig T. Stewart, who I do the What the Book podcast with. He wrote it a couple of years ago, and I'm a really bad friend because I'm just now getting around to reading it. And I just have one question for Craig, if you're listening out there. What the heck is mint wine? Like, what is mint wine? Have you guys heard of mint wine? Is this something that he created for this book, or is this a thing out there? Anybody? It sounds disgusting to me. It sounds like brushing your teeth and then go drinking some wine.
So yeah, I think it's a clever use of a new phrase. I read a book recently that had the same thing. Also, a family friend of ours is the author, and she was talking, describing a scene in a Waffle House where they have the ketchup and the mustard pumps on the table that have the dried, crusty residue left on the. She called it condiment snot. I love that. That's a new word. She coined a new phrase. I think that's the same thing with mint wine. I think it's just something the guy made up.
I don't know. I was curious.
Well, it reminds me of mint juleps or mojitos. So those are the only mint things that I would, or drinks, I think, and a virgin version. But mint is awesome. So generally speaking, if I can get fresh mint in my life, I mean, you probably got me sold. But yeah, so I would try it. I would say I would try a mint wine if it was done well, maybe.
Well, I don't know. Joey, what are you reading right now? Weren't you reading something?
Well, other than stuff I'm doing for school, I've been on a real. It's kind of ironic, right? Because we've mentioned him quite a few times, but I've been on a Lincoln kick.
Oh, a Lincoln kick. Okay.
Gary Jaffa, he was a conservative legal scholar who's one of the main guys who, like, Lincoln researchers who kind of brought Lincoln back into the public conversation in the 20th century. And I mean, I honestly think Lincoln is somebody who is really important for understanding for even what we want to do at Uncapping the House, right? Like when talking about the philosophical reasons for it, right? Like in so many of our conversations, people have forgotten what we're doing here in America, right? Like I think the America Firsts and like the nationalists, right? I think they've forgotten what we're doing. I think the progressives long ago forgot. But it's like at the end of the day, what Lincoln people and some of the haters of Lincoln, they'll say he was a tyrant, right? I think they're the lost cause,
It's not true. He was not a tyrant.
Yeah, he was not a tyrant. I agree. But that's one of the things. But the other dig that like more like progressive or like modern people will say is, well, in reality, Lincoln was a racist, right? Because they'll point to some things he said, or they'll say, and then like the fact that he said, if I could save the Union without freeing a single Southern slave, I would do it. But what people don't understand, like they're taking that clip in isolation. And Jaffa does a really good at pointing out, no, what Lincoln was doing was preserving the Republic as founded in 1776, right? Because that's the other thing, right? When he gave his speech in 1863 at Gettysburg and he said 77 years ago, that doesn't take you back to the Constitution. That takes you back to the Declaration. And the fundamental thing, the reason why Lincoln like drew a red line and was willing to go to war and all these things was not like, yes, he wanted slavery abolished, but he was prudent enough to like, I might not get my way right now, but what I can't abide is reestablishing the nation on Douglas's principle of popular sovereignty, right? He's like, if we become a nation where a majority can decide that slavery is right, well, that's a different nation. Then we've thrown out the Declaration and nature and nature's God completely. And that was unacceptable for Lincoln, right? And so, because Lincoln believed, like I actually think the American founders believed, that the government that they set up slavery would have to end, or the country would have to end, right? And obviously it almost happened, but like there was at the founding there was this dichotomy, right? This kind of, yes, we're making a deal with slavery right now, but really we've set forth the principles by which, if they're actually lived out, slavery would have to be. I don't know. So that was my thing. Lincoln has kind of been my obsession lately.
Well, this is, ties into Akil Reed Amar again. So I'm reading right now Born Equal, Remaking America's Constitution, 1840 to 1920. It's his most recent book. And he basically echoes exactly what you're talking about. There's a lot of focus on Lincoln, obviously, because it's about, the Reconstruction Amendment starting after the Civil War. And yeah, well, Mr. Lincoln was right. Mr. Lincoln was right. Mr. Lincoln was right.
But
I think Jaffa would disagree that he was remaking our Constitution, but rather I think Jaffa would just say, and I think Lincoln would agree, that we were just making the Constitution more in line with the Declaration. But that's...
So anytime you amend the Constitution, I think you're remaking it.
But I would also point out that Lincoln was not around when the Constitution was amended.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
So like I think that the Constitution gets amended in a very different way if Mr. Lincoln is around, because there was this battle in the House between the radicals and the moderates, and there was always a battle between the radicals and the moderates, and Lincoln was the guy that pulled them together and saved the Union. He was like that very calming voice that was able to bring out the best of everybody. And I would make an argument that I don't think that the Reconstruction Amendments are bad per se, but they did not get applied to the Southern governments correctly afterwards. You had the compromise, you had the election of 1877 where you had this uproar and the compromise, and the Reconstruction ended. You had all of these other problems that took place because there wasn't this calming voice. Because basically what happened after Lincoln died is Andrew Johnson was at war with the radicals in Congress. And so, it just didn't work the way that it was supposed to work. I think things would have played out very differently had Mr. Lincoln been around. I do agree, Mr. Lincoln was right, but he was right in a different way than I think Akil is trying to say. But I want to bring just a couple quotes from this book up real quick. So, Lincoln loved reading about the lives of the American founders and their struggles to break free from the British tyranny and to establish the United States. And then it goes on. It says, the histories and biographies Abe read sparked an interest in politics, and as did the nearly daily conversations in his house in his neighborhood. So Lincoln read very similarly to the way that I read. And I didn't learn this until today, so I found that was very interesting. He read a lot about the American founding, and he loved to read biographies about people. He read the early biographies about George Washington. There's a couple more in there. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I just thought that was really interesting. He was one of the least educated presidents we've ever had when it comes to formal education, yet he is one of the most revered.
Love it.
Well, I'm still working my way through the concept of representation. It's pretty dense work. But also, I've picked up this recently, but you won't be able to make anything out of.
Ooh, I have that.
You have that? Is this the coolest thing ever?
I have that exact. Is that all the presidential addresses?
No.
Oh, okay. Then I have the presidential addresses version.
Right. It's the Constitution and other key American writings. The first entry is the Mayflower Compact from 1620. And following that, before you get to the Constitution, we've got Patrick Henry's speech, Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death, the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, the Treaty of Paris, the Virginia Plan, the Northwest Ordinance, and then the Constitution.
Wow.
And going right through to the end, page 431, is Barack Obama announces the death of Osama bin Laden in 2011. So there's a lot of stuff in here I've never read. I've heard of it, but I've never read it. I got one for each of the kids for Christmas. They're getting a present. I got this for my Christmas present. That's what I'm reading. And it was like $12. I mean, it looks sweet. It's leather or whatever.
Yeah.
Probably fake
What,
leather.
so what's it called?
This area at the top says the U.S. Constitution and other key American writings.
And was
So-
the Articles of Confederation in there?
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool.
So I
Articles of Confederation, all the amendments, all that's the Susan B. Anthony on women's suffrage, like 30 pages of it.
That's cool.
So I have there is that's like a series. I think you got it at Barnes and Noble,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So like Barnes and Noble.
BJ's Wholesale Club.
Okay, so there's a series. Barnes and Noble has it, and
Right.
I have the one that is all of the presidential inaugural addresses. But that is interesting because I don't have some of those things, so I'll need to buy that so I can read it. But you mentioned something in there that goes to the point that Joey was making earlier. You mentioned the Northwest Ordinance, right? Joey, made the point of like our founders kind of envisioned a country of free people, and they had laid out a foundation, and the Northwest Ordinance was, it was kind of like the brainchild of Thomas Jefferson, one of our founders. It was passed prior to the Constitution's adoption, and it is kind of that first piece that declares that like we want to be a country of free people, not slaveholders. And we were making a compromise to unite the country to kind of move us forward. But again, there's other pieces of legislation that happens after that during the first founding era with, specifically the Missouri Compromise that, tends to agree that our founders did intend for us to be a nation of free people, not of slaveholders.
The Declaration of Independence, one of the grievances listed against the crown is that he brought this institution to the American colonies. So it goes right to our core. I mean, so probably the most abolitionist of, I don't know if he counts as the founding generation because his dad, but I mean, I think he does. John Quincy Adams. I mean,
Yeah, he's that
dude-
bridge.
Yeah, I mean that dude wanted, like, he would have abolished slavery in an instant. And he's somebody that we should. I think he has a special relationship with Congress because he's the only person to be president of the United States and then leave from there and run for the House of Representatives. Because I think he really realized that the legislature was the key branch. He's kind of he's an underrated one of those early presidents, I feel like. Sometimes.
Well, so I think his presidency was subpar. He did a lot of things. Well, he didn't play politics enough to get things done. Let's put it that way. And I think the being labeled as corrupt probably played into his mindset as president. But I think the most important part about John Quincy Adams is the fact that he went back to Congress, and he went back to Congress for a very specific purpose, and that was to fight the slaveocracy. He saw this before anybody else. It's in his writings over and over and over again. I've got his diaries. If you haven't picked up John Quincy Adams' diaries, please go do it. He was keeping a diary since he was 10 years old. It's fantastic. And he had an immaculate life, just so much going on. But he saw the fact that there was this power, this slave power that was going to do anything they could to preserve themselves. He saw it before anybody else, I think. And he was in there fighting it. And there's this great quote. I wish I had it in front of me right now. But when he's fighting the gag rule, right? Because the slaveocracy passed a rule in the House where you couldn't even talk about slavery. Like, how are you supposed to abolish slavery if you're not even allowed to talk about it? I still contend that is the greatest First Amendment violation of anything, because that means you are gagging the people of any district, of any member that wants to speak about this issue. You are
And they still
restricting
did,
their
though.
right to speak.
He found a way around it. I think
I
this is
know.
the beauty thing. He was such a tactician about this, like playing the rules with the content of the petitions. The other really interesting thing about this is I want to bring back citizen petitions getting read on the floor. Why doesn't that happen anymore?
I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I couldn't give it you the answer in a brief way right now, but there's a lot of reasons for that.
At the state level, it does, but
Yeah. All right. Well,
This
our
is
time
great.
our time has come. I have appreciated it. Let's go around the horn and say our goodbyes. Joey, let's start with you.
have a good one, and let's uncap the house, guys.
Yeah.
Short and sweet.
Let's do it. everyone go to www.y435.org, sign the Declaration of Representation, join the movement, be a part of the future of our republic.
Hashtag no cap.
There you go.
Roger.
Well, if you're looking to buy a Christmas present this year and hoping to avoid any tariff surcharges, I recommend that you buy a gift donation to the No Cap Fund, right? And present this person the opportunity to visit our website, read and sign the Declaration of Representation.
Oh, I love that. And I'm just going to say, if you're looking to buy me a Christmas present this year, if you happen to be friends or family of me, there are two things that you can do for me. You can buy me books. I'm totally cool with that still. Or you can make a donation to the No Cap Fund. That would be my preferred method. Like I said before, people don't like the fact that money is in politics, but the reality is it's there and it's a tool. And if you want things to be different, you're going to have to learn how to use the tools at your disposal. And money is one of those things. So you can make a donation to a place and to people that really care about you and your representation and try to fight for your voice. Or you can sit on the sidelines and do the status quo. But you can go to our website, www.y435.org. You can read all about representation, why the House is capped, why we need representation. And you, like I said, you can make a donation, you can sign up to volunteer, or as Walter mentioned, you can sign the declaration. So until next week, peace, love, and representation.
Ciao.